Thank you, son.
You're welcome.
Well, we just got back from a vacation. We were, a lot of people are asking, so we went to Kentucky, and we went to Tennessee, and then we went down to Georgia. It's miserable. Now, the Callahans here, they said they had to sit up front because they're from Georgia. There's a reason for you to move here, because it's miserable down there. We walked out. A week ago, we were in Savannah, Georgia, and it was 95 degrees. It just rained the night before. 95 degrees. You walk out of the hotel. You start to sweat before you even walk out of the hotel. You walk out, and you're just covered. And then we went to church, and we're in Savannah, Georgia. We went to First Monumental Wesley United Methodist Church. Well, that's a long name to spit out, but regardless, and we were sitting in there, not in the parking lot, because they don't have a parking lot, but we were sitting there, and we were watching people come into church, because you don't want to be the first, right? You don't want to be the first, and the guys had jackets on and ties, and it's 95 degrees out. Well, I thought, well, let's go in this church. I mean, they're bound to be great singers. We're here in the South. No. Not great singers. They hardly sang at all. Sandy and I were the loudest singers, and that's not because we were trying. We just sang. So it's wonderful to hear everybody sing together, sing God's praises together, isn't it? So we were there, and they have four pastors up there in the row, and they're all in robes and suits underneath. And I'm just, man, it's just, I can't imagine being up there for that long. But it was wonderful folks. Great people. They invited us to Sunday school. They invited us to be part of their choir. I said, no, I don't think that would go very well. Has anyone here ever had to do something you didn't want to do? Yeah, some of you? All right, so here I am. And today, for the next 3 Sundays, I'm doing this sermon series called 3R Ranch. Reach, Renew, and Revive, or something like that. And I can't remember. But here's why I'm doing it, because there you go. Yeah, exactly. Here's why I'm doing it, because the annual conference. Now, for those of you who don't know what an annual conference is, it's all the United Methodist churches in Minnesota. That's our annual conference. Minnesota. The annual conference is saying, we want every church to preach about these 3 things on these 3 Sundays, and we want every church to participate. So they give you, oh man, I got a big old tube full of stuff that I'm supposed to. I put out there's a nice poster out there. Notice the poster. If you see our bishop, please say, yeah, I saw the poster. See the district superintendent? I saw the poster out there. Yep, Pastor Randy, he preached on what he was supposed to be preaching on. So reach, renew, and revive. And here's what it is. It's a capital campaign. Do you all know what that means? It means we'd like some money. And they're going to do it to start new churches and to help some existing churches as well. So that's what's going on. But they didn't say exactly that you had to follow everything exact. I mean, they did give me a sermon to read, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I asked Pastor Mark. Pastor Mark, some of you don't know, because some of you are brand new today. So Pastor Mark, he was, now he's a district superintendent. So the annual conference is all these churches, but there's a bishop, and then there's these district superintendents. And so those are the ones who are supposed to carry out and make sure you do everything you're supposed to do. So I asked Pastor Mark, he's a district superintendent, and I said, what would you do if you were sitting in this chair now? And so he told me, he has changed. He has changed. So he told me what I should say. I ain't going to say it. But this is what I started. I went, well, okay. What was it like at the very beginning of this church? What were we like? So when I got back from vacation, I came over here and I took some pictures. And so I took this picture of this stone that's out in the front of the church. If you haven't seen these stones that are on the cornerstones, well, they're not on the corner. I don't know, which doesn't surprise me for our church. They're right in the front. And this stone is called Joyce Chapel, and it starts in 1902. And in 1902, actually it started in 1900. Back then, there was no city of Coon Rapids. There was a city called Anoka. Okay, you can get your groans out if you'd like to. Anoka. And this was just the east side of Anoka. And there was a guy in that church, a Methodist church. His name was James Carter. I'm going to call him Jimmy. Jimmy Carter. Now, he's a lay member of that church, which just is a fancy way of saying that he wasn't ordained, okay? But he went to that church, and he's thinking, there's a lot of people over there on the east side of the county that they can't come all the way over here to Anoka. And I think if we started some kind of church over there, there would be people who would come. And he and his wife, and they didn't name his wife, but he and his wife said, we'd be willing to start right away. We'll teach Sunday school. We'll start this church. And so I don't know what the people of Anoka were thinking, if that was something they really wanted to do, or if this was just Jimmy Carter's idea and they did what a lot of preachers say, because this is what preachers say when I have an idea, Pastor, that you should blah, 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 and you say, and the preacher's supposed to say, well, that sounds like a good idea. Why don't I put you in charge? But Jimmy Carter, he decided to be in charge. So got the people behind him and started this church. And if you're looking where to find Joyce Chapel, this structure is not there anymore, but this is what it started out like. And if you would go up Hanson Boulevard, and so I mean you go north on Hanson Boulevard, and once you get north, once you get to that, I don't know what it's called now, but it used to be a BP station there on the corner. I mean, it just changed like the past few months. So that corner, and then right across the street is the cemetery, Joyce Chapel Cemetery. Our church was literally in the northbound lanes of Hanson Boulevard, sitting right there. That's where our church started. And that's what it looked like. And Jimmy Carter is, you want to show me a picture of Jimmy? Jimmy is over there on the right-hand side. I like his stash. Very nice. And Ben Shattuck, Benjamin gave the land for the very first part of Joyce Chapel. And I love this story about how we started. So in 1902, they finally get it built in 1902. For 2 years, Jimmy is trying to get all the money and trying to do all those kinds of things that started. And I'm sure some preacher said, oh yes, I started that church. No, Jimmy started that church. Well, friends, God started that church. He used Jimmy, and he used Ben, and he used a lot of other unnamed people. Like this next picture here, he used them. Yeah, all those, that was our first youth group. How'd you like to invest in that? And God said, we're going to start this. And so Jimmy, he wasn't ordained, but the very first sermon at our church was done by Jimmy Carter at a nail keg. You know what a keg is? It's like a big old barrel. That was his pulpit. And that was our very first sermon. So I want you to all know, you go back and tell your friends, that my church was started by Jimmy Carter. Well, it started to grow. And I asked a couple of people from our church. Now, they didn't know all the way back to 1902. But there are a couple of people who I asked. I asked Sally Ismay and I asked Carol Harmon, tell me stories about the church. Because Carol, this is what kind of started me on this whole thing. So if you don't like the sermon, please blame Carol Harmon. If you like it, it was all my idea. She said, I remember our church. I remember that little church, and it was busy 24/7. And way back then, yeah, there was all kinds of people using that church. For this and for that. And well, when I asked a little bit more, a lot of it was things that was pretty normal for congregations to do. But our church, it didn't have any moniker. It said it was called Joyce Chapel. It wasn't called a Methodist church at that point, even though it had been started by Methodists. It wasn't a Methodist church yet. She said, I think it was more of a community church because all kinds of people used it. I asked Carol, I said, well, did you grow up in that church? She goes, oh, yep. Mom and I went to that church all the time. Dad didn't go. Makes sense. There's been a lot of people who have come to church to worship God, and they're waiting on some family member to show up sometime. And that's how God uses us. So from 1902 to 1953, we were in this little church. What's the next slide there? I think it had that's one of our pastors from way back. We had one of the first female pastors. That's Ina Stout. She was our pastor from 1912 to 1915, and then we must have laid her off, and she came back in 1919 for just a year. And I love that picture. I don't know what she's pointing to. If she's pointing to the Bible, like, you better read it. But most of the time, our congregation was served by lay pastors, by people who were, like, she was a Baptist, so it was served by Baptists. It was served by basically anybody that we can get, because do you know back then we didn't have any money? I'm waiting on you. Yeah. But God continued to bless our church. And people kept coming in. And then finally back, so this is our church from 1902 until 1953. In 1950, our congregation went, oh, wow, we're growing. Well, also what happened was there was now a city called Coon Rapids. So finally, we weren't part of Anoka anymore. We became our own city. And the city of Coon Rapids began to grow. And our church began to grow. And so there were people in the congregation that said, we need a new place for us to worship. There's just not room. And so in 1953, this is what it was going to look like. And the next slide there is Reverend Overmeyer. Reverend Overmeyer was sent by the annual conference to help our congregation build a brand new facility. That new facility ended up on this piece of property. And there, he's digging the very first spadeful with two little kids. I think this was a staged photo, I'm not sure. And there's where the altar is, and there's Reverend Overmeyer, and that's where they first dig our church. Now, I want to tell you about the story about how they all got there. We had a worship service up in Joyce Chapel, and on June 2nd, or June somewhere in there, very first part of June, what we did was, as a whole church, we marched. We were in processional from way up there to way down here. And we marched in processional to come to build this brand new congregation. And there were people from other churches who were lining Hanson Boulevard, who were praying for us and blessing on us. And I don't know if anybody sang for us or not, but that was, and people remember that. Even to this day, they remember that processional. Well, Sally said, I don't think I was there. I'm sure I was home tending to the twins. But that began, and then we became Coon Rapids Methodist Church when we moved down here. From there, the congregation continued to grow. Here's the dedication of the stone, of the cornerstone. And the next place is 1963, I think. Is that right? Oh, this is what the very first structure looked like. So this is our church in 1953. So that was the brand new church. Joyce Chapel remained up there for some time, and then I think it was early in this 2000 or 1999 when they finally took Joyce Chapel and put it someplace else. I think they destroyed it. Part of our history. But you know what, friends? You read the Bible? Does anyone here read the Bible? All hands. All hands. The church is never a building. So the people who started this church, and it kept growing. And in 1963, we started saying, well, we need some extra spaces. There are more folks who are coming to the Lord, who want to know more about Jesus, who want to worship together. And so in 1963, this next stone is when how we added on to this part of the church. Now, I know that it was later, I think it was in the 70s, because we celebrated 40 years when the daycare started. The daycare started because there were a group of people in our congregation who said, you know, there's a real need to have a place where people can bring their kids, because not everybody in Coon Rapids has a lot of money. And so they're going out and they're trying to find jobs, but we need to have a place where they can leave their kids in a safe environment. And so they started our daycare. So that's a ministry of our church. And friends, if you look on the calendar, if you pull out that sometime this week and just see all the stuff that's going on, our church hasn't changed in terms of the way that we continue to reach out to the community. Now, we do it in different ways than other churches do. But our way is to invite people to come in here and to use the facility in all kinds of different ways. I see there's a homeschooling group that's going on this week. I know there's basketball that's going to go on. I know there's AA. I know there's NA. I know that on Wednesday night, it's plumb full here on Wednesday nights. This is the first church, literally the first church I've ever been a part of, where you can drive to this parking lot, and at some time during the day, every single day of the week, you are going to find cars in there that aren't broken down. They come and they go. Every single day of the week. That's our church. Now, in 1995, the congregation continued to grow, and we said, we need to continue to build on, and so we built on, and so and that looked like what we're in now. And that's the last stone that's been added out front so far. And all because of people who have reached out and invited other folks. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Has anyone ever, well, first of all, I think I know the answer. Has anyone ever had plans here? Ever made plans? Some. Okay. Have you ever made plans and then things didn't go according to plan? If you read the Bible, who reads the Bible? Quicker. Come on. There are times that there's a plan, and then the plans change. Let's just go back to Moses for a moment. Remember the plan? The plan was bring the people out of Egypt, bring them home to the promised land. That was the plan. The plan was cross the Red Sea, go into the land, but the plan changed, right? God said, send 10 spies in. 10 spies went in, or 12 spies went in. 10 of them came back and said, those people are huge. We can't do anything. We were in Atlanta on Sunday. Now, you guys were from Atlanta, right? Don't go to Atlanta when, what's their football team's name? I don't even know. Nor do I care. But whatever they were, Atlanta was playing the Saints from New Orleans, and I guess they are longtime rivals. And if you watch the game, we didn't watch the game, we were just driving. And so at the very end of the game, Atlanta loses the game like in the last 6 seconds. I don't know what it was. But don't stay in a hotel where Saints fans and Atlanta fans are in the same place when Atlanta loses. It's not pretty. You see, the plans had changed. Atlanta was supposed to win, and they didn't. But God always is at work. We had a plan here, too. Our plan was to start this brand new congregation. We started it. And it didn't end like we had hoped. But God still worked through that plan. Some of you are here today because of that church. Hal's raising his hand. I don't know, do you want to ask a question, Hal, or? I'm just checking. I was thinking about the past year and 3 months. For those of you who don't know, I've been here the past year and 3 months. That's it. And the past year and 3 months, we've gone through a lot of different changes. 30-some years walked out the door of pastoral leadership in the past 3 years. Pastor Mark's been here for 13 years. Pastor Bill was here for 11 years. And Pastor Colin, well, he grew up in this church. And we've had a lot of changes. And some of them are going to say, well, those were okay changes. And some of you said, I wish the good old days were back. But now you got me. But God continues to use all of us in all kinds of different ways. And I don't know how long our church is going to be around. None of us do. If you read the Bible, who reads the Bible? Thank you. That was a much quicker. I want you to read some of Paul's letters. He wrote a letter to the church in Philippi. He wrote a letter to the church in Colossae. He wrote a letter to the church in Galatia. And you know what? Those churches are not there anymore. But the power of those churches, because God supplies the power, friends, they're always there. The church is the people. And so I got this picture of what that is in the past 6 months. And some of these pictures are from those times. And the church is always the people. When we were gone in Savannah, they were great folks. And I know they're brothers and sisters in Christ. And I'm going to see them when I get home. But right now, we are in this place. And at this time, and God is calling us to continue to reach out and to invite people into a relationship with Him. Now, sometimes you're going to meet folks who already have a relationship with God, but it's been on hold for a while. Do you know how often a United Methodist invites a person to come to church? 1 in every 100 years. 1 in every 100 years, the average United Methodist Church member, invites somebody to come to worship. I'm going to invite you to do something different. Would you, in the next month, think on one person that you would invite to come to worship? Just one person. Now, I'll tell you, I'm not good at this either. My neighbor next door, his name is Steve and Jane. And so we've lived there for a year and 3 months, right? And Steve and Jane even came to this church before. So they even know where it's at. They know some of you. They even came to this church. Well, next door, Mark lived, because that's where I'm living. And before Mark, Grant lived. So he said, I don't know what it is with me, but I always get stuck with pastors somehow. I love Steve. So I'm thinking, because he told me that he had been to this church and been a part of it. And so I'm thinking, well, I shouldn't probably invite him to church. I wouldn't want to make him feel nervous. They're probably going to a church of their own. And, that'd just be a little bit too pretentious, me asking and anything like that. So So I finally asked Steve on Friday, because there was a tree coming down in our yard. So he's right next door. It's going to fall in his yard. I think it's a good time to ask him to church. I'm looking for Steve to make sure he's not here. Steve and Jane, no, they're not here. So anytime you want to come, Steve. Well, I don't know, maybe. I'm a Midwesterner, which means that I don't, there are things that you just don't talk about, right, with folks. And inviting them to church or talking about church with them too much is, that's not good. It is good, but we don't think it's good, right? We don't want to push anything. So here's some things that you might try. Just might. If things aren't going well in their lives, you can just say this: I'm praying for you. That's all you got to say. Now, if you're not that kind of person, because that's really going out there, right? Just pray for them. I do little, what I call little arrow prayers. So I see somebody and they look lost, and they look like their wife is saying that they're lost. I pray for the guy. Lord, please help his GPS to work. Arrow prayers, they work. What we're good at is we can send a card praying for you. Some people say just be an example. That works. It takes a long time, though, friends. And sometimes we're not the best examples, right? I want you to know that we were placed in the Midwest at this particular time with our particular culture, and God works through us anyway. I know, I loved to hear our church clap, but I knew that once we started clapping at that anthem, that we would die out. I mean, especially if we start right away, and then, oh, they aren't clapping. Okay, don't clap anymore. No matter if Pam's up here going, clap, everybody clap! She's from the South. God still works through people. From 1902 until today, God has always worked through this congregation. And you know what? He's still doing it. And he will. And even when this church is gone, the legacy, don't you want our legacy to be that we reached out and that we invited people to come into a relationship with God? I hope that's your desire. And I hope you won't hang me for, it's 11 o'clock. And we still got a couple of hymns and some prayers. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for calling us here in this place and calling us to be witnesses to your word. We ask, Father, that you would use us in this time and place with our culture, knowing everything that you know about us, and still use us so that even more people would know your love, would find your grace, and know that they are accepted in you. And God's people said,